Hi, everyone. I'm Kay Bell, and this is the Harlem Writers Guild, the Writers Corner. Today, we have suspense thriller writer and poet Judy C. who have received a Master's of Arts degree in English Creative Writing and a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Liberal Arts and Sciences from the City College of New York. She has worked as an educator, freelance writer, and editor. In addition, she has written two suspense thrillers, An Ocean of Jewels and A Gift to Treasure. Her most recent work is The Gathering of Gemstones, a poetry collection. Miss Andrew frequently writes about social issues and characters who seek ways to rectify dangerous experiences. Her favorite issues to explore in her writing is foster care, education, history, and the Gullah Geechee culture. Let's welcome the Writers Guild very own Judy C. Andrews. Hi, Judy.
Hello there, Miss Bell, Miss K. Bell, extraordinaire. Thank you very
how,
much. It's
how
a
are you
pleasure
feeling
to be here.
today?
Oh, I'm feeling fine. It's like a beautiful, cool day compared to yesterday and the week we've had. So I'm feeling pretty good.
That's
Thank you.
good. So let's jump right into the interview. So I've been reading your poetry for over the last few days, and what I noticed immediately is that there's a bond with the earth and the Black body. So can you
Yes.
take us through what it's like for Judy Andrews to arrive at these places of thought and creation?
Well, I started writing when I was much younger. Actually, I was in junior high school, and this teacher, you know, recognized my work, and I had told a story, but it was a dream sequence, and she really liked it in my English class, so that inspired me a lot. And then it was something that just came naturally to me. English was something that I loved, and all of my teachers were pretty hip and down to earth and easygoing, and I just loved research, and I loved doing the work that they assigned. It was fun for me. Where most people, hate English. English was, my almost like my passion. So I began writing. I wanted to write my feelings down because it was a way to escape. And reading was another way for me to explore other worlds. So I enjoyed both of those things because they helped me become much better.
Yeah,
I enjoyed being, in the world of the writer. I really
yeah,
enjoyed that, you
yeah.
know.
I agree. Like I've always heard, and I'm a true believer that reading and writing goes hand in hand.
Yes,
And it sounds like you agree with that too.
yes.
Um, so tell me about the Harlem Writers Guild and what it has done to inspire your work and where you are now as a writer.
Well, the Harlem Writers Guild allowed me to publish my first book, which was a suspense thriller called An Ocean of Jewels, about a young woman who discovers her Gullah Geechee heritage. The Harlem Writers Guild allowed me to meet fabulous people, and we had such a great time whenever we had a party. Many of the writers would invite other writers to their homes. For example, Betty Ann Jackson, who lives up in New Rochelle, would invite us, and to the delight, we would have Ruby D or Ozzie Davis sitting right in the backyard of her home with us, having a good time. Also, Irvin Berge, who wrote the famous song for Harry Belafonte,
Hmm.
Day, oh, Day, oh,
Hmm.
you know, I would be sitting right next to him. People like Terry McMillan, I didn't meet her at the meeting, but I did get a chance to meet her at the Harlem Arts Salon. And we talked a while about, the Harlem Writers Guild and her time there. Walter Dean Myers had an opportunity to take us to lunch. It was a sad moment at that time because one of our members, Bob Desverney, who was a brilliant African American author, a science fiction author, he had passed away on a specific day, and we were there for his funeral. But Walter Dean Myers was there, and he took us to lunch. And at this time, he was a millionaire. So here he is taking. We were in Harlem, after the funeral, and he takes us to a wonderful Caribbean restaurant where we're all going, well, my God, is he going to pay? Is he going to pay? We didn't say anything, but I think he felt it. And of course, he said, of course, this is my treat. He was so unassuming and such a great author. He wrote over 200 books, for young
Wow.
adults. He was fabulous. And we had many book parties for him. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to meet John Henrik Clarke, who was one of
Mm.
the founders of the
Um,
Harlem Writers Guild
yeah.
back in the 50s. Okay, I was not born in the 50s. I was born much, much later. But I had an opportunity to meet John Henrik Clarke. And the funny thing was that it was at most of his parties were at his, home near City College. And one day I walked into one of the parties, and it's the African custom that they sit at the door and they actually greet the people who come into the room.
Mm.
And I really didn't know him that well. And he was sitting at the door with one of our other writers, Grace F. Edwards, who's also a wonderful mystery writer who passed away last year at the age of 87. Well, they're both sitting at the door, and I just walk into his home like, this is my house. But I walk into his home, and he's sitting right there, and I just say, hi. And I just kept going. I was so embarrassed because you're supposed to greet them as they're greeting you. You're supposed to just
Mm.
go in and say, hello, sir, how are you? And then you go to the party. But I just said, oh, how you doing? And I just, it was so embarrassing. But the
Well,
parties we had and the people that we met and the writers who came into our meetings, we met at the Schomburg, we still meet at the Schomburg Center for
mhm.
Research in Black Culture. But the people that we encountered during that time that I was there, that I started going, back I really started going in the 90s, but I joined in the late 80s. And I didn't publish my first book until 2006. So I just sat there because I was mortified, because you had these great authors, who would be sitting next to you, and you're like, they're famous, and it
Yes.
was just so, unassuming. They had their little headscarf on, or, they had a nice little glass of wine. There was a time in the Harlem Writers Guild where we would bring our food, to the meeting, and we'd be, licking our fingers and passing the food around and sharing, the fried chicken and, the collard greens, because at the time, many of the restaurants that are not there now in Harlem are gone, but we would go to maybe Pan Pam's across the street and
Mm.
get a good meal and then come in and sit down and eat. That has ended now. We don't do that anymore, but it was so pleasurable. And oh, we had wine, and it was wonderful because at the time I was teaching, I would come, to the meeting just stressed out after my teaching day. And our meetings were from 6 to 8 p.m. And once we got to the meeting, Grace Edwards and Betty and Jackson would have, these fabulous bottles of wine. We'd have Prosecco, and we'd be sipping our wine and eating our fried chicken or some, carrot cake.
And writing, right? And
And
talking about
writing.
writing.
We still would write. And
Yeah.
Grace would take us to her home in the Hamptons, where we got to meet Russell Simmons and all these great people in East Hampton, which is the quote unquote African American part. And we would go and, go to B. Smith's restaurant. We would go and get delicious, seafood. It was just a wonderful time,
So you had all of these amazing connections, so all of these
Yes.
wonderful writers. Tell me the most important advice you've gotten about writing from any one person.
Well, from Grace F. Edwards, who was my mentor, and she was like my second mother. She's a great mystery writer, a writer for, that wrote about Harlem, because she grew up in Harlem. The best advice that she told me was to be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. And also always write the truth. That was one of the best, feelings of advice that she actually offered me.
I love that. I love
And
that because a lot of times I think like um especially I guess when it comes to poetry, I feel like people think that it's all imagination,
yeah,
but And it is, right? We're creative, but at the same
Yeah.
time, there has to be a level of truth in there too, right? I think
Yes.
that the poet, does bear some truth in their work. Or you're not just a poet, you're a suspense writer, and um you've also, written other things. So yeah, I think that there definitely needs to be some level of truth.
Yeah.
So let's hear something, Judy. Read something
Okay.
for us.
I'm going to read a section from my third book. This is my most recent book, The Gathering of Gemstones, a poetry collection. And I wrote about social issues, romance, a lot of romance, the things that women go through. And I also wrote about African American men and the things that they go through that I think they
Hmm.
go through because, I don't know. But I also wrote about social injustice. And one poem that I'm going to read is called Breathing While Black.
Yeah.
And
One of
this,
my favorites.
thank you very much. And this I wrote because, over the past couple of years, not over the years, over the centuries, just to walk outside as an African American person, your life could be in danger, especially for African American men, but for any of us. So I wrote this, the title is called Breathing While Black. Earth did almost die when our people disappeared in plain sight of hate. Earth did almost die when our bodies hung from trees and were forced to leave black dust. We almost did stop breathing when 911 operators answered. Gutter thoughts sit inside prison walls, waiting for the next event, just because the reflection in the mirror was upset about a color. A wall of decay embraces geniuses who hold keys to cures, keys that can lock up death. Life behind bars keeps eyes from feeling alive. One reason to fight and thrive. There are no places to weep or keep one's reflection sane or find solace when playing the rehabilitation game. Small wonders do erupt to disrupt the constant circle of decay. But when one gets out one day, a new day welcomes darkness. This thief steals light and gifts, scares reflections to commit deeds of destruction. Mothers of justice wait in horror for time, a friend of darkness, to glance at a profile and not see color. Precious rubies of kindness wait for a place to rest, but there are no jewels of peace if one finds the brutality of police. So we, the people, keep seeking solace. We, the people, come along to rescue Barbecue Betty, Profiler Officer Pete, Creepy Car Follower Fred, Telephone Invader Tina, Party Pooper Pamela, Lemonade Lady Laura, Volunteer Victim Vinny, Gun Guru George, multitudes of them, police sirens. The mansion of prison lies so close to the earth's floor, covered by cement. It welcomes an industry, vain, with incomprehensible ideas about rehabilitation, a stifling cancer of society's racist multitudes. Gutter thoughts sit inside prison walls, waiting for the next event to be spoken, just because the reflection in the mirror was upset. Earth did almost die when our people disappeared in plain sight of hate behind prison walls.
Wow, that's gorgeous. And
Thank
when I
you.
think about those jewels of peace, Wow, I mean, such beautiful lines. Earth almost did die. That's, I mean, for me, that's saying as like Black people, it shows the importance of our presence here on Earth and why we need those jewels of peace to thrive. I love it. One of my favorite
Yes,
poems.
because I wrote it out of this idea that, if you call the police because we went swimming in, a pool that you share with your neighbors, with our children, they could die
Yeah.
because situations get so out of hand that the police do not know how to de escalate many situations, which is why we have the deaths of so many African American people.
Calling
We
the
thought it
cops on a
ended
Black
George
person
Floyd.
is
It didn't.
definitely an
Yes,
act of violence.
yes,
Definitely is an act of violence. It's
yes,
almost saying as though I wish you died, because
yeah,
you never know how it goes. And for me, and I think when I was a little younger, I used to think the threat was mostly towards male, but
yeah,
now I'm realizing that threat is for all Black bodies. It's
yes, it
not
is.
just for
Yes,
male. So I think that piece really speaks to you know exactly what you said, the social issues that are present in our current time. So
yes,
tell me, what inspires your writing? So we know that, I know that like the stories on the news and the things that is going on in our world definitely
yes.
inspire you to write. But tell me, how do you choose what makes it on the page?
Oh, I feel like sometimes I'm like a painter with words. Instead of a paintbrush, I'm using words, and I come back and I play with the words. I want my writing to be also a representation of an art form, because
Mm,
writing is really an art, which is why a lot of writers like to call themselves artists.
yeah.
That famous line that Erica Badu says, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my ish.
Yes, yes.
She's a trip. We really want to write about an experience that, may affect other people. I write to uplift, and I try to use words, that uplift. I try to be careful about using maybe the N word or the B word, in context. There's no cussing in here, but I do talk about it,
Mhm.
name calling, all of that. I try to stay away from. I try to keep whatever I'm writing about, no matter how difficult the situation or experience the character or narrator is going through, I try to keep it as positive in the end as can be. Because on TV, we always see, law and order, everything ends nicely, they catch the bad guy. But in real life, that doesn't happen,
That doesn't always happen. Yeah,
right?
I
But I want
agree.
to show that there are two sides.
Well, what I heard you say one time at a Harlem Writers Guild workshop is that the world needs to see Black love and life without suffering. And what I
Yeah,
love about your work is that it embraces tenderness, it's gentle, and it
thank
encourages you
you.
to look beyond the earth and arrive at a place where there is pain and suffering, but there's also happiness and a sense of
Yes,
wholeness.
yeah,
So I definitely feel all of that in your
yeah.
work. And as you said, that's exactly what you aim to do. So I definitely think you're meeting those objectives.
Well,
So
thank you. Thank you. I wrote this during the pandemic, but I had a lot of poems that I had written over the years. And I never really thought, about doing a poetry book, because I said, well, nobody's going to want to read this. This might be too deep, but this might hurt somebody's feelings, or this may not be what I want people to know about me. Because as authors, we're really sharing our life. You're really sharing tiny pieces of your life. So it's important for you to be careful about what you put out. But I put this out because, during the pandemic, we're all at home, and, we're on lockdown, and I needed something to uplift me. And I usually
mm,
write for myself. I really don't try to compete with anyone. I don't go after competing with other writers. I just want to write for myself and get it out because it's cathartic for me.
that's interesting. And you're bringing up the pandemic, which brings me to my next question. How has COVID affected your writing? Do you write more? Do you write less?
Mhm.
Has it put you in a fog? I know, like for me, I've been in this like writer's fog
Yes.
because I'm home stuck with the kids. But
Yeah.
what about you? Like, how has the pandemic affected, when you write, how you write, or
Mhm.
anything like that?
Well, the pandemic has, had me in days of fogginess as well. And for a while, I didn't want to write anything because things were so bad, last year around this time that I was glued to the TV. And I found myself watching too much TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I have to get out of this. But when I retired in 2016, I retired a year earlier before my retirement kicked in. Um, I found myself doing things that would get me in trouble. I was watching too much TV and I was eating way too much. And my doctor was telling me I'm pre this, I'm pre that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I never had this before. So I decided to create a schedule. And during the pandemic, that schedule saved me. So, I know what
Mm.
I'm going to do from hour to hour. I mean, I admit I've been a little lazy. I don't want to do it,
We
but
all
it
have been.
helps to have a schedule. And I used to laugh when people said you when you retire, make sure you have something to do. And I'm like, something to do? I'm retired. I'm going to relax and do nothing. But you need to have something to do because every day is Saturday. So
This
you
is
have
so
to find
true.
things to
This
do.
is so true.
It's like the people who live in Hawaii, they have the beautiful beach and they have the rainbows. And when you go down there in Hawaii, they sit at the highway and they're eating and relaxing, but they're bored out of their mind because every day they get to go to the beach. And you're like, well, you get to go
They're
to the
all
beach.
beached out.
You see
Yeah.
a rainbow every day. And, they can spot the tourists because we're all doing this. We're looking up at the rainbow. There's a rainbow there every day. The weather is beautiful. And there's nobody on the beach. The people who live there are not on the beach.
I think that's really good advice for someone that's going into retirement. But
Yeah.
also give us some advice for a young writer, like an upcoming emerging writer. What type of advice would you give
Listen,
someone that's new to the
yes,
field?
develop your instincts at an early age. That's
Mm,
your gut reaction, your first reaction to any event. If something doesn't feel right, like Oprah says, if in doubt, don't. If you are feeling doubtful about a situation, don't do it. But
yeah.
as a writer, it's important for you to keep a roof over your head because, during the pandemic, we saw many struggling artists who, just couldn't pay the rent and
Yeah.
many of them got evicted. So the first thing as a writer is, if you feel that you're not making enough money as an author, get a job that allows you to write. That means you could do temp work, you could get a 9 to 5 where you don't have to
That's
take
such good
stuff
advice.
home.
Yeah.
I dove into teaching because everybody said, oh, you could do it, you could be a teacher. Well, teaching doesn't give you a lot of time to write because
Right.
for writers, we need our mind. Our mind is our key to producing work. And if your mind is filled with, I have to call this parent, I have to grade this paper, I have to talk to this child, um, you don't have time to focus. And writers need a lot of quiet time alone
Yes.
to prepare and to do the things that they love. We sit and think and we stare at a wall all day or a computer
Hmm.
all day. So you need to first pay your bills. That's very important. Pay your bills, have a place where you can, go to talk to your friends when you're feeling down. Create a tribe of people that are there for you, that love you unconditionally, and that will tell you the truth.
Hmm.
"Judy, I don't think this works. That's
Yeah.
not going to be a good book.
Yeah.
And have some fun.
Yeah.
Enjoy life. Go out and even if I'm a homebody, I love to be home. I love my apartment. I like being home, but I do like to go out too. But the main thing is to pay your bills and have a job that you can go to where that's not going to stress you out so much, so that when you get home, you can write and have a schedule to write. You don't have to write every day, but you should write something. Over the years, I've kept I have about 25 to 50 journals that I started when I was in college, way before Oprah did the gratitude journal and everything. But I kept the journal because it was a way for me to write. And now they've piled up to maybe, I have about 50, maybe 50, 25 to 50 journals.
Mm.
And I write about anything. My
Do
feelings
you
on
often
anything.
go back to them and like use them to rejuvenate? Because I feel like I
Yes.
also have journals, and then like in my dry seasons, like
Hmm.
because in the journals I kind of jot down ideas, and then
Yeah.
in my dry seasons I kind of like go back to them and kind of
Yes.
use them to rejuvenate. Do you do the same thing?
Yes. I use them
Yeah.
to see how I've healed or to see how I've come out of a situation. Because sometimes you
Yes.
forget, like, this was a terrible situation and I got out of it. But sometimes you
Yeah.
forget that you got out of it. You're like, oh my God, how is this going to affect me from now on? How am I going to deal with this? This horrible thing is happening to me. What am I going to do about it? But you can always go back to your writing and say, well, that was terrible and you got out of that. So
Yes.
you can be able to get out of this.
Absolutely.
Because there were
I
days
agree
when
with that.
I knew God was watching. I'm like, God has got to be protecting me from all of this because this is rough, and we're gonna have rough times. And for writers, I think set yourself up so that you can have a life. So that you're not working from 9 to 5 and then going home to work again because some writers have families. I was,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I didn't have one because teaching took up all my time. So I never was like able to really go out and, you know, um, go out after work because I was so tired. And then all of my friends are single who were teachers when I
Mm.
was a teacher. We're all single and no kids. So I did sacrifice that because I would have loved to have had that, but I sacrificed it. But you have to make some time for yourself as a writer to have a life and to write and to enjoy the people who are in your life. You have to be able to enjoy them because without your friends and your family, you could be lost.
Yeah.
And
You
they
need to
they
have
could be,
that sense of
yes,
community. And
yes,
although you didn't have children or
yeah.
get
Well, it's not
married,
like I had children.
you did it does sound like you have that sense of community,
Yeah.
not only with your other friends that are teachers, but definitely in the Harlem's Writers Guild, because
Oh
I mean,
yes,
yeah, we're
yes,
like a community of that feels very much like family. So,
yes. They and we were. We. It doesn't feel for me. I have to say this carefully. It doesn't feel the same because so many of the writers that I was there with have moved on or passed away, or they have moved out of the state. But we still keep in touch with a few. I still keep in touch with a few, and the people who are in the guild now are really incredible. Like incredible writers, incredible people, and there's still that kind of family existence there for us. It's a little different than it was back in the day because we just cut loose and said whatever we wanted. Now it is more business oriented because of the technology.
yeah.
Because of technology, we had to change and we had to move forward.
And
But
people are like really focused on getting published and really
yes,
making writing a career. I
yes,
think, when I first realized that I wanted to be a writer, I didn't really think of it as a career. I
yeah,
thought about it as like, something I would do on the side. But I
yeah,
think that some people really make it a career choice, like
yeah,
a real focus. So I think your
yeah,
advice, going back to your advice about making sure your bills are paid, I think that is awesome advice, because even if you do decide to make it a career, which there's no right or wrong way, just
right,
always remember, like, sometimes things don't get published in a certain amount of
right,
time,
right,
or as fast as you thought that it would. So it's just
yeah,
always good to have that, mentality of, what, let me do what gets the bills paid. And when
yeah,
this comes, it comes.
right,
But
you know.
before we go, and I want to hear at least one more poem from you. So let us hear
Okay.
something else.
Okay, I think I have a positive one. This one is called, I'm going to look for it. It's called Sister Rise. And it was, let's see if I could find it in here. It was really a poem that I wanted to feel good about, that I wanted to write that made me feel good. And it was a way for me to get up and face another day during a pandemic. So let's see if I could find it in here. I used a paper clip so I could find the pages quickly. That doesn't work that well either. But I have it on my Kindle. It's on my Kindle, but I'm going to read it from here. I think you may have heard this before. I read it at the Guild a while back. Sister, rise, pull up the shades and scare darkness. Lift up the gaze of hazy, crushing air. Inhale the crystal wind of light and breathe. Come on, sister. Open up your heaven and strike the earth with pleasure as she listens to the sound of your voice, ringing in happiness. Look over there. Joy is waiting for you to prosper and reflect. Catch the rain with your mouth. Feel it on your tongue. Throw a kiss to the appetite colored sky and breathe. As your bosom rocks, drink in the Sophia wisdom, because God is listening, breathing, hearing, pausing, speaking, honoring, touching your passion. Smell it. The sweetness of your perspiration, tears, work. Work it, girl. Sister, rise. Stand tall with the pyramids of your like the pyramids of your ancestors. The treasures of your descendants will cry out, shouting songs of happiness. You must do it. Rise. Live life. Don't run back to what broke you. Instead,
Mm,
rise. Let
mm.
go of the conspicuous air, torpedoing your righteousness, kindness, love, peace, joy, pleasure, torpedoing the malignant essence of your life, dreams, accolades. Open the crystal window of forgiveness, spit out the anger onto that old place where grass is dead, weeds grow, water is bottled there, nourishment has run amok. Sister, rise to your greatness. Stomp on the haters with your tenderness, enthusiasm, motivation, inspiration, excellence. Sister, rise. Let the opal globe rejoice in your presence. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
I love that. I feel so empowered hearing that. That
Thank
is such
you.
an empowering piece.
Thank
Oh, wow.
you.
I just really appreciated that. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for that. And the line, don't go back to what broke you.
Yes, I
Keep
read
moving
that
forward. I love
somewhere.
that.
Yeah, I read that somewhere, and an actress I think was talking about it. I'm not sure which actress it was, but they were talking about how you shouldn't go back to things that hurt you so badly
Mm-hmm.
because you just conjure them up again,
Mm-hmm.
and it's better to just breathe them out, breathe them in. They were already in. Now it's time for them to come out, and just breathe them out. So a form of meditation maybe can get that out. But
I
we
love
must,
that.
we're in a time where we have to get rid of this, the pain and the suffering and the fear. We cannot walk in fear anymore. Even though there is police brutality and white supremacy and racism, we cannot continue with the fearfulness, because that is what's bringing on the stress.
Mm.
And we're facing horrible circumstances almost every day, you know, and we have to find ways to
To
alleviate
move
it.
forward and
Yes,
yeah, to get to walk in our strength. So
yes,
really quickly before we go, I have two more questions actually. The
yes.
first one is so we've heard your poems. I love your poems. Tell us
Thank
a little bit
you.
about your suspense thrillers. What is the difference in the writing process between when you
Mhm.
write your suspense thrillers and you write your poems?
Well, in the suspense thrillers, you're really telling a story. I like to tell stories with my poems
Mm-hmm.
too. The poetry I like to tell stories with. But with the suspense thriller, you have a plot. That's the main difference. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have a conflict, and you have to solve the conflict. And you not only have a conflict, you have a situation that's scary. The thing about mysteries, which is why I love all that's all I watch. Law and Order. Um, I still
Do you
watch
watch CSI?
Columbo. What was
Do you
that?
like do you like CSI?
I love
I love
CSI.
CSI.
I
Yeah.
loved it even better when, if you're listening, Derek Morgan, I loved when Shamar Moore was on it, and I still watch him on SWAT. I think he's just a fabulous, fabulous man. So if you're watching Shamar, Dinner,
Come
maybe.
on back.
No, I don't know if I can handle him. He's like, he's too much for me. I would faint in his presence. I would faint. But yeah, murder mysteries. Well, I don't do murder. In the first book that I did, there was murder, but murder kind of creeps me out when I'm writing. So I try to make it suspenseful. In this book, this is called The Gift to Treasure. This book was about sex trafficking. So I tried
Mhm.
to write suspense and mysteries from a point of the African American experience, you
Mm.
know, because there's so many. What gave me the idea for this book was that there were so many African American women who were disappearing, who were not being investigated. And there's still a lot of women who have not just women, children, young children, um, where the police are not looking for them. They just gave up on the case and they've become cold cases. So I wanted to write about sex trafficking because that is a real problem, not in America, not just in America with the, you know, Jeffrey Epstein case,
Mhm.
but throughout the world, you know, particularly in places like Africa and Libya, there is a slave trade still going on there. So it's important as writers that we write about those things. And even though this is based on fiction, this is a fictional book, but it's based on real experiences. And I had to do a lot
Exactly.
of research, you know, about sex trafficking.
So do you do the same? So what about with your poems? So in your suspense thrillers, like you're really, going back to like the shows that you watch and
Oh,
your
yeah.
research. So with your poems, do they begin with a word, with an idea? Like
I,
what is the
yeah,
beginning point with
yeah.
your poem?
I always begin with a title. Titles seem to guide
Oh,
me. Some people do the title last, but I
yes.
always
I
start
never
with a
thought about
title.
starting with the title first.
Yeah.
Okay. I always struggle with the title. So tell
Yeah.
me, how do you do that?
Well, I start with something, you know, like a phrase, you know, even it could be in this book, which was sex trafficking, I used a biblical verse. It wasn't even a biblical verse. I wanted people to read Psalm 8. So,
Mm,
you know, it's about, you know, the goodness of the earth and the beauty of the earth and to be thankful for what you have. It's about
okay.
gratitude, Psalm 8. So it starts with that. But I didn't want to title it Psalm 8 because people would think that I was writing, you know, a sermon or
Maybe a Christian
something.
book. Yeah.
Right. And I just, you know, I like to use motifs. So
Mm.
in the body of work that I'm trying to build, I write about jewels and treasures
You
and
use that in your
diamonds.
poetry too.
Yes,
Yeah.
I like those motifs, and I like to bring them back. I think the next novel I'm writing about a woman with the last name Diamond. So, you know, I think that I will keep that going for a while. I like to create my own places because trying to do research about a place that a character lives is really daunting, and sometimes the research takes you away from the writing.
Mm.
But it's fun to create my own
A
places.
really good point.
Yeah, I created Jewel Park, New York, which is a town based on upstate New York, where
Mhm.
people of African American descent settled, coming from Gullah Island that I created called Eva Creek Island. And these two communities are predominantly African American, and they pretty much, you know, have their issues in their community. It's sort of like Tulsa's Greenwood community.
Okay.
Um, and you know it's being people are coming in from other cultures because they are discovering this new community in Jewel Park and Eva Creek Islands. So I
So
like to
you're
create my
working
own
on
stuff.
more. Well, actually, that brings me to my last question.
Yes.
What is in the future for Judy C. Andrews? Are you so
um,
you're working on more suspense thrillers,
I'm
more
working on
poetry? What's coming up next?
I'm working on a suspense thriller now. I created a blog so that I could write my nonfiction pieces without waiting for someone to say, "Okay, I'm gonna put your piece in my magazine, or my newspapers." I just didn't want to wait for that anymore. I think
What
the
is the blog's
technology is there.
name?
The blog is browngirlreflections.com or just Brown Girl Reflections. And I just write about stories of interest to me. I wrote about George Floyd's, I don't like to call it an anniversary, but the commemoration of George Floyd. Recently, I wrote about Concrete Cowboys with Idris Elba. Idris Elba is married, but I'm happy he's married, but oh my goodness.
I have to see that movie. I keep saying I'm gonna take some time to watch it. I heard it was wonderful.
It's wonderful. And there are great scenes in it about Black fathers and sons. There's a wonderful scene with Idris Elba and his son trying to keep him out of trouble and out of the streets, and it portrays African American men in such a beautiful way. And I wrote about that because we have a real group of concrete cowboys in Philadelphia as well as New York. At Pelham Bay, there is,
I didn't know that.
Yes, the horse racing in the Bronx that goes on throughout the year. They're all around the country, so I wrote about that. So I try to find things that are of interest. I wrote about my experience with an ex-boyfriend. Yeah, that was very interesting.
Those are always goodies.
He was a con artist, so I wrote about self-love. It was really about self-love,
So tell everyone where they can find your work, your website, where they can find your books.
Yes. You can find me at blessedbrown.com, BLESSED, Brown, BROWN.com. Yes.
And they can also purchase your books on your website?
They can purchase books through Amazon.com or their favorite bookstore, Barnes & Noble, any bookstore of their choice. If it's not there, they can order it for them. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Judy. Yeah. I feel like I've learned so much more about you. We always participate in the Harlem Writers Guild workshop meetings together. And I feel like I've already known you through that, but getting a chance to sit down and talk to you and listen to the stories and just the inspiration behind your work, it was such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. It's time for you to be interviewed. Yes.
Soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciated this interview so much. And it's wonderful because we have this channel now that we can do this, our little corner, and technology is so important for writers, and writers can do amazing things now. This is the time to write. So if you're afraid, get rid of that fear and just dive right in because this is your time. Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Until next time. Bye.
Bye everybody. Thank you.